and joined in the studio with Darren from Hartlepool Action Lab. Thank you so much for coming along again, Darren.
Nice to see you again, mate.
And Tracey Houghton from Thrive. Tracey, welcome to Radio Hartlepool Towers.
Oh, it's great to be here as usual. Yeah.
I can tell you're impressed with our great build, and thank you so much for coming along. So, Darren and Tracey, Darren, of course, we've met before from the Hartlepool Action Lab. Tracey, you're from an organisation called Thrive. Do you want to let our Radio Hartlepool listeners give them a bit of a brief kind of synopsis over what Thrive does?
I try to keep it brief, but that's a little bit of an impossible task if you ask me. So Thrive are a very small charity. We operate in Stockton, but we work across Teesside, and we also work on a national level. Our main aim is to give a voice to people who live in poverty so that they can influence decisions that have an impact on them. So we create a more fairer community, and we listen to the difficulties that people face, so that policies or decisions that are made have a more a better outcome.
Because I'm guessing sometimes some people in towns kind of think that decisions are maybe being made by local organisations such as the local council perhaps are being made kind of out of their grasp, that they kind of don't get a say really.
I think what happens is generally local authorities or policymakers or whoever they are who make decisions, they rely on statistics, and statistics will give you an understanding of the difficulties that are occurring in any community. What they don't offer is the insight. They don't offer that, the way that a decision is made can have a negative impact. And I think decisions are generally made in a very honourable way, as in they have good intentions, but really the consequences of them decisions make things really hard.
I can imagine as well. Darren from Hartlepool Action Lab. Now, Darren, you were telling me a bit earlier when we were talking about this subject, there's apparently a new socio-economic duty coming into play, isn't there now?
Yeah, and that's Hartlepool Borough Council really sort of shifting the way that they worked previously. So, we know that when you look at them statistics that Tracey's talking about, poverty levels are rising, health inequalities rising, all of these impacts on people in Hartlepool, it's all going the wrong way. And there's a real acceptance that the way that we've been doing things and the way that the local authority have been doing things isn't working. The statistics show whatever's happened hasn't been working. This is the new way of doing things. So if you find yourself sitting at home and you're thinking, you're sick of this and you're sick of that, this is the time now to actually speak out, and this is the time when we have as much of a chance to change things as we have done in the past 10, 15 years perhaps. So it's not that this work hasn't been sort of happening previously, but there's a real shift to make it more impactful and more embedded into the way that the council are working and the way that the local authority can interact with the voluntary sector and the third sector and all across Hartlepool to really support more people.
And I think that's much needed as well, bearing in mind, the events of kind of the last year or so in particular, that kind of, things are going up in price. We've all seen the kind of fuel costs going up, food prices as well going up. And, whereas some people, might have thought they wouldn't be affected, by kind of stuff like that. I'm guessing even people who were maybe kind of even on a decent wage, were working, are still struggling now these days as well.
There's a huge new demographic, and we're going to be experiencing hardship, if not poverty, for the first time. And there's a real tricky system to get through with regards to the benefit system, with regards to accessing local welfare support. It can be quite overwhelming, but what we want to say to people is ask for help, speak out, use your voice, use your experiences to help others. And the help and support is there. It's just having the confidence to be able to sort of step outside of your own community and ask for help. And once you're in that position, use what you learn and what you've learned previously to help others.
So it sounds like a great organisation you're part of, Tracey, Thrive. And you were telling us there about a video that's been produced. Darren's looking for it right now. He's scrambling for it on through your website. But what's this video all about, Tracey?
The video has a number of objectives, and one of them is to inspire local people to speak out. Because if you're struggling, whether you live in poverty or whether you live in hardship, sometimes it's very difficult to have that motivation to give your voice or lend your voice to affect decision making. You're too wrapped up in the daily grind of getting by. So it's an inspiring video like that, as in people do have power through their voice. It also advocates for what we call local authorities or politicians or businesses to adopt a participatory approach. So if you are thinking of making decisions, how can we work in a collaborative way so that all voices are heard to inform, the best way forward. So, yeah.
That sounds very wonderful. And Darren, did you find the video?
I did. It's on Thrive Teesside's website. There's a section for videos. It's on YouTube as well, Poverty to Solutions. Yeah. Absolutely
amazing. So have a look at that after the show, and you'll see exactly what Tracey's on about there. But like I say, Thrive, great thing, and it's good that Thrive are working with Hartlepool Action Lab as well, because I know Darren you kind of tying up with other groups, don't you, really, for the Action Lab?
Yeah, that's right. And what we hear quite a lot, which really links in with this, or what we find, is that people who've experienced poverty or experienced hardship, they develop this resilience, which is to be commended, but also it's a real barrier to break down. That people just think that, well, I'm doing all right, I'm struggling on, I'm just getting by, my money's just making it, or I'm all right borrowing from this person, borrowing from that person. What we want to say is that experience is what is so valuable to this process. So all people need to be involved in this kind of thing is just their lived experience, whatever they've been through, whether it's a single person or a family or anything that someone's been through where they've experienced hardship. That is value to this process. So we hear all the time that people don't think that they can add any value, or they even there's been people who've told us that they don't feel like they're poor enough. That type of thing, that perception that people have that they can't add to this process is something that we want to really break down. Anyone at any level can have a voice and share their voice and share their experiences.
It's really important, isn't it, really, because you can make changes. You might think, well, why should I bother, nothing's going to change, but things are starting to change, really, and you can see that now.
Can I just add a point to that as well? I said, obviously, I'm a Hartlepool girl myself. I've lived here for over 50 years, and I've suffered hardship throughout my life, so I can empathise with other people, and I know the struggles that they're going through. And another big barrier that people face is that stigma associated with living in difficult circumstances. And I think some of the ways to address the problem is to make things more universal. So talking to a lady the other day who was at a food bank, and she says just by attending a community centre or a church where food banks are, is automatically you're targeted straight away, and people then assume or know that you're living in poverty or you're struggling, and then assumptions and judgments can sometimes be made, well, why has she got a smartphone, why is she not working, why, and instead of understanding and really getting to grips with the difficulties people face, then we can't give the right response. And I think there's something to be said, isn't there, about not just providing services, but also challenging the stigma and the perceptions of people and the barriers that prevent people from taking a job, because work is not always the route out of poverty.
I think it's like you say, it's kind of understanding, and also, funny that you mentioned that about, well, they've got a smartphone, so they must have money, because these days you pretty much need a phone, don't you? Even if you're kind of claiming, benefits like universal credit, you need a phone, to get in touch with them. So, that's probably the reason why they've got a phone, really. So it's, really, I think we need to be a bit more all understanding about, kind of what's going on, especially in Hartlepool as well. Hartlepool and I Got You, Babe. We've got our very own version of Sonny and Cher in the studio today, otherwise known as Darren from Hartlepool Action Lab and Tracey from Thrive. So, Tracey, basically, you really need people to get kind of participating, don't you, in this project. And how do they do that? How do they kind of, get involved with Thrive?
So, before I go on to that, I'd just like to give a little bit of a shout out to Hartlepool Borough Council and Hartley Power and Hartlepool Action Lab, who've helped this, be born and to come alive, because without the other organisations as well, this wouldn't happen. But to get involved, what happened is starting a couple of months ago, we went out and did a little road trip ourselves and did some drop-ins. So we sort of tried to spread the word throughout the localities, and then so what we need to do as well is then engage in groups that are already delivering on the ground in this area, which we have done. And at the moment we've got a core group of people that generally meet over Westview at the Westview project. So there's a core group of people who are actively involved in taking this forward now. But to get involved in the next step, it's obviously to probably reach out to Hartlepool Action Lab or Hartlepool, with them being based in the town, just to present your name. And then what will happen is it's about me going out and just developing a relationship first. So people just don't come in blind, you know, and think, oh, what's all this about? What can I do? So we sort of, you know, spend some time developing a relationship and then bringing them into the fold.
I mean, obviously Thrive is kind of, you know, a Teesside-based group, so you kind of cover a lot of the towns across Teesside. Mm-hmm. But were you kind of, when you first went along and met the likes of Hartlepool and Darren here, were you impressed kind of, you know, with their kind of, you know, enthusiasm for Hartlepool? Be honest, you know, I know you sat next to me, but, you know,
I am impressed, and because it's a hard field to work in, isn't it, addressing poverty or improving people's lives, and so you have to take your hat off and commend all that. I think if I'm being objective and a bit critical, it's about how do we marry up a little bit more, how do we collaborate so we're not duplicating, because we haven't got enough resources to duplicate, so relationships are key, and instead of us each doing our separate pieces of work, can we build better bridges in order to do that? But yeah, total hats off to what's already happening in Hartlepool.
I think it's great, you know, to see kind of different community organisations working together as well. So we're going to be talking more to Darren and Tracey after our next song from Diplo and Miguel. I am joined by Darren from Hartlepool Action Lab and Tracey from Thrive. And, you know, like I said earlier, it's great, you know, you guys working together as well. Thrive working also with kind of the council and Hartlepool as well. And it's very important, you know, this project, isn't it, that you're kind of currently in the midst of kind of, you know, trying to, you know, kind of get things working, like Darren says, with this socio-economic duty as well. You know, absolutely brilliant what you do.
Well, it's not that I'm not pleased that you think it's brilliant, but if I was being honest with myself, we'd rather not be doing this job, wouldn't we? We'd rather that there was equality, we would rather that services did meet the need and that the resources were put in. But unfortunately, that's not the position we're in at the moment. And I think, leading back to my last point, is it's a big cultural shift for any local authority to work in this way. Because if you've always done the same things and worked in a particular way, you know, there's a mindset that needs to shift here as well. And so I would applaud that for at least starting on this journey and starting them conversations to how we can do things differently.
Definitely. And Darren, from Hartlepool Action Lab, do you find, Darren, that's kind of, you know, especially when you're dealing kind of with poverty, which is a huge situation, do you find, you know, it's best to try and get in there first to be proactive rather than kind of reacting to the situations?
Ideally, yes, but that's not always possible. What we know is that, you know, there's a lot of people who are trapped in poverty currently and have been trapped in poverty for a long time, and then there's those on the other end of the spectrum who have just fallen into it, and then obviously there's a huge spectrum in between. So ideally, the less time someone can spend in poverty, the better their outcomes will be long term. So, you know, there's measurements pre-pandemic that 2 years in poverty is sort of like that gap where we want to get people out of poverty within that 2 years period. And what's really important for that to happen is for everybody to understand that this can happen to anybody. A lot of people are just a couple of wage slips away from experiencing this kind of thing. And the more that we, you know, sit in our glass houses and throw stones at people who are going through hardships for whatever reason, there's multiple complex reasons why people experience poverty. But we all need to pull together and we all need to pull in the same direction, because this can happen to anyone. And without this kind of approach, them statistics that we spoke about earlier are just going to continue going the wrong way. And we need to be the ones that shift that and change it.
I mean, for, you know, what you said there, you know, anyone can basically, you know, you could be in a great job 1 week, and then on the Friday you might find out, you know, kind of that you've been made redundant, you're losing your job. And that's how kind of the process starts, isn't it? You know, that you end up kind of basically, you know, losing a lot of money and, you know, find yourself struggling to pay the bills and everything as well.
We all experienced isolation and we all experienced, you know, lockdown. And for people living in poverty, that's the reality day to day, you know, and for people who are living with hardships, that's just the reality day to day. So if we can use that experience of knowing what it feels like to be trapped in that box that we were in through lockdown, we can really make a dent in the amount of people who are experiencing poverty. And that's so important that we understand or we maintain that mindset that we should always be asking why things are the way they are. We don't just accept that they are. Everything that we go through now, the benefit system, the economy, it was all designed by people, by politicians, by people voting, and we can be the ones to shift that. It just takes that joined up effort and that, the strength in numbers to be able to change the way things are.
Yeah, can I just add something to that? When you talk about strength in numbers and that, I mean, I've talked in particular about the local authority, and how pleased I am that they're on board with this. But it's not just the local authority that we need on board, is it? Poverty's in nobody's interest. And if you even look at businesses or, other areas, schools, for example, and there are practices that they can adopt that will mitigate, any risks of people suffering even more than that they already are. So if you talk about agency work, if you talk about 0 hours contracts, if you talk about childcare, if you talk about additional costs to the school days, these are all mitigating factors that exacerbate people's problems. So although I'm happy about the local authority being on board, the shout out today is not just for people, is it? It's for other, services, businesses, schools, whoever, who have a vested interest in our community.
Literally everybody, and I mean everybody's got to work together, and really, to try and combat this poverty situation, because it is terrible, particularly at the moment as well. So we're going to be talking more to Tracey and Darren as well after our next song from Joel Corey and David Guetta. Joined by another great double act as well, Darren from Hartlepool Action Lab and Tracey from Thrive. Been a great conversation we've been having today. I mean, nobody likes poverty, let's face it, but there are some important issues, that you're working on, and the work continues, doesn't it, as well? And it's important to keep up that work and keep badgering away. And obviously, Tracey, it's great that you're working with local Hartlepool groups such as the Action Lab as well, Hardy Power, even the council as well, and you're going to continue with that work as well, aren't you? You're determined.
Oh, for definite. It's not a quick fix. This is a long-term solution, isn't it? And adopting a different way of working takes time to embed.
And you've got that video as well that we were talking about earlier as well. That's a great example of what Thrive does, really, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. Check it out. I think it's www.thrive-teesside.org.uk, and you'll find a link, a YouTube link as well for the video. So I would encourage not just people but organisations to have a little look at that and be inspired.
Definitely. And Darren, you think the same as well, don't you, that everybody, including organisations, need to kind of get involved with this?
Yeah, there's so many people having such good quality conversations. Whether even if you work in a cafe, if you work in anything where you're speaking to people in the public, or even if you're just having conversations among friends, if you ever find yourself where you're sitting there and you think that's not right, that doesn't sound right, or this shouldn't be the way that things are, it's not right that so many people are experiencing this kind of poverty, then you really do have a part to play in this process, because those conversations, if you don't share them, they get lost, and when they're lost, they can't be any value to anybody else. So it really is important that if you are having these conversations, wherever it is, whether it's in your own home, whether it's in a community setting, a shop, anywhere, get involved, get in touch, and we can sort of make sure that conversation, that energy, that injustice is part of this process that we can sort of try to change.
Obviously, Tracey mentioned that Thrive is on got their own website, on social media as well. Hartlepool Action Lab, you're on social media as well, aren't you?
Yeah, we're on Facebook at Hartlepool Action Lab. We're on Twitter at HPool Action Lab, and we've got a website, hartlepoolactionlab.org. That video is available on our social media as well, so I really would implore anybody to have a watch of it.
So there's no excuse to kind of miss out on that video. It's very important that our Radio Hartlepool listeners have a watch of that and understand it a bit more. Meanwhile, Darren from Hartlepool Action Lab and Tracey from Thrive, thank you.